Good morning. I'm Phil Owen with Communities for Recovery and the Targeted Response Team. Today I have a very, very good friend of mine. We know each other from many walks of life, and his name is Chris Gates. Hey, Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's glad to be here.
So Chris and I both recognize each other as friends from many different walks of life, but most importantly, friends in recovery. Chris, do you mind giving us a little background about yourself?
Sure. Born and raised in Austin. Been a musician my whole life. Had some success with that through the years, as is the case with a lot of musicians. In my late 20s and early 30s, the casual recreational drug and alcohol use stopped being casual and recreational and started becoming vocational drug and alcohol use. And as the last big band I was in was coming to an end because things were changing, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I came back to Texas in an attempt to first get sober, but moving didn't change anything. They still had heroin in Texas, apparently. And it took me about 4 years of struggling around on my own because I didn't know anyone in recovery. I'm 21 years sober, and in the mid-late 90s, I didn't know anybody in recovery. That turned out not to be entirely true. Once I got sober, I ran into 5 or 6 people that I hadn't seen in a while, so I just assumed they were dead or in jail. But the last few years were ugly and tedious, and I'm a nice boy from a good family who got involved in a bunch of heinous crap. But sobered up on October 5th of 98 with the help of Music Cares. Discovered Music Cares when it was brand new, and they helped me go to treatment, and I've been sober ever since. And it's been an interesting journey. Got to play music again for a while sober, and for the last, 8 or 9 years, I've been working in one area or another in the treatment business, sort of. I spent 5 years helping develop a peer coaching program, and then for the last 4 years, I've been working at Austin Recovery, teaching 12-step education and helping facilitate their alumni program. So that's
Right.
where I'm at.
Well, I've always been curious. I've never flat out asked you, but I dare to call myself a lifelong musician, but I consider myself a career band member. Musicianship, I believe, implies talent, and that was never really my thing. I'm a performer. But I do believe what we share in common is, for a long time, that was my job description. And I felt like part of my job description was doing drugs. I always tied it to my ego and the fact that I was a musician. And I felt like if I quit doing drugs, it would take too much away from me to be able to be creative anymore, for people to think of me as a creative. Was that anything you ever considered? Or?
Oh, absolutely. There were a lot. It was scary getting sober with this identity. My last name for the bulk of my adult life was whatever band I was in, and Chris from whatever. And there were questions that I had to answer. The first one was, why is it that all of my favorite musicians seem to be alcoholics and drug addicts, and why is it that when they sober up, they seem to suck? And for me, because I'm a systems analyst by nature, what I realize is that humans in general are overwhelmed by their emotions in their teens and their 20s. And if you're a songwriter, you start writing songs in your late teens and early 20s, and the emotions are overwhelming, and eventually you vomit them out on the page and make a song. And as you're getting older and doing it, your craft continues to improve. And then most of the greatest rock records have been made by people between about 27 and 32 years old. They've gotten really good at the craft of songwriting, and the emotions are still huge. But as you wander into your 30s, normal people stop being overwhelmed by their emotions. And if you're not careful, you end up with these very well-crafted songs with no emotional core at all, like some of Don Henley's stuff in the mid-'80s before he found a better way to write too. And where the addict figures into that is they stay overwhelmed by their emotions longer, and the craft gets better and better, and they're just making these more and more intense pieces of work until they can't function at all. And so for me, it was like, how do I find that raw emotional core without having to be buried by the emotions and out of my mind? And I found ways to do it, no problem. actually my writing got way better once I was sober because I have more perspective on what I'm writing. You know, I can get, it's like method acting to me. I put myself back in the middle of all the emotions I'm trying to express, but I'm doing it from a centered spiritual spot so that I have more perspective on what I'm doing. And I love this, you know, nothing I've done since I got sober has been as successful as the stuff I did before, but that's because I'm in my 40s and not my 20s. But I'm more happy with what I'm creating now than ever, you know, and it's because I was able to let go of those models, you know. And I love when Steve Earle was on tour supporting a record he made of Townes Van Zandt songs. He was real vocal about the fact that Townes didn't give us these songs because he was an alcoholic and a drunk. We got these songs in spite of that. And how many songs did we not get because he was too fucked up to finish them? You know, and that's really, you know, it takes some perspective and some sobriety typically to come up with that perspective, but it's true.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I can tell you, like I say, and I joke about it, but there's part of me that's half serious. My talent is not natural. My talent is earned. I rehearse it over and over and over again. That's timing, that's tuning, that's everything. And sometimes I still don't get it right. But I can tell you this, sobriety has made me a lot more focused. I'm a lot better at my performances. Hugely better at my performances than I was before. You know, some of the antics may not be the same, but the music.
Yeah, but I'm not 23 anymore. It's not funny anymore at my age.
Right.
It's not antics. It's just sad if you're in your 40s, 50s. Like that's just, yeah. You know.
But yeah, I totally agree with that. And the decisions I can make with the band now on new material and stuff are just razor sharp compared to before. You know, which kind of comes into that whole, before I was a codependent, hugely codependent in my addiction. Hugely trying to please everybody in the band, and instead of just putting my foot down going, no, that riff sucks. That riff sucks. I can't do anything with it. You know, or at least to be able to do it in a way that you can move forward, you know, without insulting somebody or
Right.
you know, every other musician in the band behind their back, that sort of thing. I always felt like bands didn't need a manager. What they needed was a marriage counselor for polygamists.
Yeah.
You know, if we all had a marriage counselor that taught us how to get along and talk to each other in a friendly, compassionate way, we probably could have survived the roller coaster ride, and probably not, because the drugs would have been removed too. But I always felt like there was some therapy needed. Band managers were there to either mask all the bullshit that was going on behind the scenes, or, you know, they just had the connections and earned their percentage through that, but never really did anything to help the band survive those hard times.
I actually did some work with a couple of bands in the early 2000s when their bands were still getting signed for a lot of money. And a buddy of mine that worked at a label had me talk to 2 young bands, spend a few days with them. And my whole job was to just come in and sort of teach them how to rehearse so that they could be better as a band, you know, instead of just like playing the song over and over again. There's ways to rehearse better. But also I would sit down with each member of the band and ask them if they understood their role in the band. Like, if you're the bass player and the guitar player, the singer, or the songwriters, is that okay with you? Or do you think you should be a songwriter too? Because that's not your job in this band. And if you really want to be the songwriter, you need to go start your own band and let somebody come in who just wants to play bass. And like, but just having the conversation, you could see them go like, oh, right, I'm the bass player. If I want to do stuff with Mike, but I love their songs and I want to play their songs. It's just that little bit of clarity that nobody ever offers, you know? And
right.
And yeah, I agree with you. Plus, like, I built my music career in the 90s around seeing how loaded I could get and still just barely be able to play songs I wrote.
Right.
You know? So now it's like, I'm being sober. There's so much more space in the music. You know, It's not a just purely visceral experience anymore. I'm also present in the moment while it's happening, and that's awesome. So.
Well, and the snowball of lies that follow that too. Well, you don't get it. I can't play these songs sober.
Yeah.
Because I've got to not only tell everybody else that, I've got to tell myself that.
Right. Well, and it's one of those things where it's like, playing music with your buddies starts out just as this fun thing you're doing on the weekends, but if it becomes your job, you got to start asking questions about why I have to be loaded to do my job. Because if your dentist has to be loaded to do his job, somebody's going to step in, you know.
Right.
this is either a job or it's fun, but it can be fun, but I can't treat it like it's not a career. And if I have to get loaded to do my career, that's a problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and for a while, even before I got sober, I had gotten to the point where I at least wanted to be clear going on stage. And I was like, nobody gets messed up before we go on stage unless you can do it better. And yet I never found that individual did it better. But I found 90% of the people that told me they did.
Yeah, of course.
So once again, had to wipe the chalkboard again and have a different approach. And now I just find that playing with people that enjoy the music first, we all have an equal starting point.
Yeah, same way. You know, you don't have to be sober, but you have to be sober while we're doing it. You know? Sure. You know, I don't want to. Yeah, it's just and I'm too old for that crap anymore. So you know.
Yeah, I don't care about your lifestyle, but when we clock in, you know, we have to clock in and able to do our best job possible.
Yeah, whatever the job is.
That's right. Hey, Chris, I wanted to talk a bit about acceptance and gratitude, because for me, when I got sober, I didn't have a whole lot of it at first. As a matter of fact, I can remember being outside the courtroom where they had just offered me treatment or trial. And I was talking to my lawyer and I said, he goes, look, here's the deal. You've got 6 weeks to go to treatment and complete and come back with a certificate for them, or they're wanting us to go to trial and they need an answer today. And I just grinned and I looked at him. I said, yeah, we've got them where we want them now, don't we? So we had to hit refresh and he pulled me outside the courtroom and we had a long talk.
Yeah.
And bless his heart, because he really tried his best to let me know that that was not the situation we were in. But I just couldn't let go of that, because that's just where my head was at. So I had acceptance on that. So needless to say, it was the last day of the 6th week. My name was on the docket, and I drove to Austin Recovery rather than driving to the courtroom, and they let me in. And I'm so thankful for that. And I don't even know if acceptance was part of it then. It was more fear. I didn't want to go to jail, and that's what would have happened that day. But as I got out, and people like yourself welcomed me with open arms, and I got acceptance, and I got gratitude. And I learned that I didn't have gratitude without acceptance. And I was just wondering, anecdotally or however, if you'd like to address that.
Yeah, well, sure. It's like, to me, real acceptance isn't possible on its own. Acceptance is a byproduct for me of being engaged in a program of recovery and building my spiritual condition, because if I still think I need something from the world to be okay, then I'm not going to accept that I don't have that. But when I understand that the thing that I really need to be okay only comes from filling up my spiritual condition, you know, the peace and ease I'm looking for is a spiritual issue and not getting you to act right, then it's easy to accept what's going on outside of me if I don't need it to be a certain way to be okay, because I'm already okay. Now, you know, there are situations that, like, I have to accept what's going on in the world today because I don't have any say. But I don't have to like it, but I do have to accept what's happening, and it comes with certain rules, and I've got to follow those rules. And gratitude is much the same, where I would say I was grateful for stuff, but it had no real substance. And then somebody told me that real gratitude is only possible when you can really remember what it was like before the gift was received. So, like, saying I'm grateful for my car is just pandering unless I remember what it was like not to have a car.
Right.
You know, saying I'm grateful for my recovery is only meaningful if I remember what it was like not to be in recovery. And part of how I remember what it was like not to be in recovery is to be around new people and to be trying to help new people all the time. Like, I always joke that people in 12-step recovery meetings all the time say the newcomer is the most important person in the room, but they don't ever say why out loud, you know? And it's not because the newcomer themselves has an inherent value, but there's only 2 ways to remember what it's like to be a newcomer if you've been sober a while. One is to stop doing all the work and end up loaded again. And the other is to stand right next to a guy who hasn't got any experience that this is going to work and
Right.
doesn't know and is still scared and is telling you how they're thinking. And inside, I always go, oh my God, I remember when I thought that way. You know, please come along with us. Please come do what we're doing. And how much I don't want to be him ever again. So I make sure I'm taking care of the daily practices I need to do to keep my disease in remission. You know, and I get overwhelmed with gratitude when I'm around new people because I'm not them anymore, because I know how to make sure I don't ever have to be them and that I have things to share with them so they don't ever have to be them again either. You know, and that's, you know, the gratitude I get from that, you know, it keeps me open. It keeps reminding me of where the solution to my problem is found and that I do have the tools to go get it. I may not be using them, but I do have the tools, you know, and then acceptance. If I've already got the thing I want most, you know, the two things I wanted in life for most of the 90s was to just feel comfortable in my own skin and to feel like I had enough agency to take effective action. And I have both of those things now, and I know exactly why. So, you know, that's the beauty of where I'm at today is like, I don't have a lot of fear today, even though there's a lot of scary stuff happening. And that's because I'm building today on the shoulders of yesterday. And I know why yesterday went well because I lived it with intention. And as long as I do what I did yesterday, today will go pretty good too, even though we're in extraordinary times. And so I can accept what's going on, even though it's scary. I can have serenity and fear at the same time. You know, but I don't get to let the fear control how I'm acting.
I totally agree. And I think too, you know, we're amidst the COVID-19 as we do this interview. And I think, you know, I can follow suit and get on social media all day long and gripe and complain about everything that everybody else is going to and chime in. Or I can try to find some hope in it all and try to figure out what positives might come of this, because I'm sure that there will be some.
Oh my God, yes. Like I'm seeing it in the recovery community to start with, where I'm doing these online meetings and some people, they're agitated, they're struggling a little bit, but they're basically okay. And other people are losing their minds. And I've got people coming to me and asking me, how come you're calm when I'm losing my mind? And what it seems like it's boiling down to is like, you know, one of the program aphorisms is some are sicker than others, and I'm one of the sick ones. I have to really apply these tools to my life all day, every day. And only about 20% of my recovery is based on connecting to a supportive community. An awful lot of other people, 80% of their recovery is found through community connection, and only 20% is any sort of actual daily practice. That's not right or wrong. It's what's working for them. It's what's working for me. But now that that's been taken away, they're left floundering. But I'm seeing a lot of them being driven into the daily tools that I use, and getting the results from that over this month or so long period that they've been in the thick of it. And I don't think that'll go away when they're able to go back hang around people again. I think it's causing a rebirth in a lot of the members of the recovery community. I also think that every successive generation since World War II in this country, addict or not, has become a little bit more, had the ability to become more self-centered. And that, you know, we're not fat in this country because of corn syrup and McDonald's. We're fat because we're spiritually unfit as a culture. And I'm watching all these people who've spent the last 5 years staring at the phone in their hand and not connecting to anyone, being driven into this desperately disconnected place because now they're staring at a screen all day, every day, trying to get connected, and it's not working. And I hope, my hope is that a lot of those people are driven through the other side. And when they actually get the ability to go out and start connecting with actual human beings, staring at the fucking Facebook feed is not going to get it anymore. And they're going to read that disparity between the real aloneness of staring at a screen and the real connectivity of being around people and trying to be a part of an unselfish community is going to be so profound that an awful lot of people in our culture, addict or not, are going to fall away from that, you know, digital trough and start trying to connect with real people again. That's my hope.
Yeah. I think it's an important thing to point out too, that for those that may be watching that are in recovery, is to remember that we are a resilient part of the population. We've already been through a whole hell of a lot, and we've persevered, and we can persevere through this. And I think, you know, that not only Can we persevere? But we're suited for it. We suit up and show up.
Right. We're good in a crisis. We don't even tend to notice in the middle of a hurricane. But also, like, I've spent the last 21 years doing battle with an invisible, fatal foe. I had to, in the beginning, the tools that I was given for recovery were awkward in my hands, and I felt stupid, and I wanted to blow them off and pretend I was fine. But I wasn't fine, and every time I'd try to do that, it caused me problems. But once I got familiar with the tools, they just became part of what I do. And I think a lot of what we're experiencing in society is people balking at what is essentially the new normal for the time being. And I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to stay at my house. I don't want it, but like, okay, don't. A bunch of people are supposed to have been like storming the Capitol in Michigan because they don't like the shelter in place order. And I'm just waiting to see how many of them get sick.
Right.
Because bless your heart, we're not doing this to be mean or trying to take control. We're just trying to keep our health system from being overwhelmed.
Exactly. Well, so we don't run out of time while we're recording. I'd like to move towards, if we could both throw out some places where people might be able to get help. People that are struggling, people that have relapsed, people that are new to recovery, recovery strange to them, they don't know. During these times, what are some options for some people to reach out and get some help right now?
Well, first and foremost, it's the world of online meetings. It's not commenting on Facebook feeds. It's interacting one-on-one exactly the way you and I are. Like, some of the online meetings I enjoy. A lot of them I don't. I know some people really, really love online meetings. There's millions of them now. I have 3 meetings for the alumni from the treatment center a week. My home group does 3 meetings a week. There's just a huge list of resources of online meetings, mostly on Zoom. But also, it's forcing me. Well, this is one of those beautiful things that I don't think is going to stop once we're done. Is like, it's forced an awful lot of people who have never become familiar with video chatting technology to get familiar with it because they have to. And I don't think that's necessarily going to go away, because I've been really, like, I hate talking on the phone. I hate it. But I really enjoy one-on-one Zoom conversations.
Right.
I get a lot out of them. I feel almost as connected sitting here talking to you as I would sitting here talking to you in a room.
Right.
Not as much in a room in a chat meeting with 30 or 40 people.
Sure.
I do that too. But I've been trying to reach out to some folks. My sponsor, I have a regular Zoom meeting with my sponsor every week. I've been trying to reach out to other friends and just get together for 10 or 15 minutes, whether they're in recovery or not, and make that connection, because it's that connection that reminds me I'm not alone, and reminds me that there are things I can be doing, and I tell the guys that I work with that, that I'm sponsoring, that like 4 15-minute Zoom conversations a day is a meeting.
Right.
And you have the absolute power to do that. And I know it's uncomfortable. Get over it.
Right.
How many times did you go knock on the door of a house you've never been to because your dealer wasn't around and you heard there was dope in that house? That's retarded. Right. How many times did you ask where Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard was? It's like, and so, the online tools are the first, and it's just getting connected so that you don't feel alone, and that you don't feel like you're the only one struggling with whatever the thing you're struggling with is.
Great. So reach out for an online meeting. There's Communities for Recovery. That's CFORR.org, CFORR.org. There is the SimsFoundation.org. That's for musicians that may be struggling. MusicCares.org, which Chris had mentioned earlier, who helped him. Sims Foundation helped him. So if you're a musician and you're in a bad place, reach out to one of these places and get connected. Reach out to somebody and talk about it. Get connected with some online meetings. Just get connected. Isolation is where we find ourselves in addiction, and connectivity is where we find ourselves in recovery. Chris, it's so great to have you on. And I want to get on, once you guys start doing something with the alumni meetings, I'd like to have you back on to talk about that. We kind of ran out of time on this one.
Yeah, before we get out of here, also, The Austin Recovery Alumni Association has its own website. It's just austinrecoveryalumni.com. On that website, there are links to our alumni meetings, but there's also a link to a living document of every AA meeting in Austin. There's also a link to a page I built on the website that's got online CA and Narcotics Anonymous and Heroin Anonymous and Crystal Meth Anonymous meetings. Like, there's a huge resource on there. Plus, there's about 170 Austin area speaker recordings on that website. There are videos of all of the 12-step education lectures that I've taught. There's all kinds. There's a Joe and Charlie step study. There's a copy of an audio version of the big book on there. There's a ton of resources on there. And it's all mobile friendly. If you've got a phone, you're set. So I would encourage you, whether you're an alumni or not, go check out the website and feel free to use the resources.
And what's that website again, Chris?
It's austinrecoveryalumni.com.
Great. Hey, thanks so much for being on, and everybody have a great day.
Yeah, hang in there, folks.